The cage came up with 19 helmets in it. 18 men stepped out. I didn't notice the difference at the time. Nobody did. Not me at the hoist, not the medics, not the men themselves. It took the security footage to show us, and even then someone had to point it out. At Caldervale, we run on brass tags. Every man has a number, stamped on a little disc the size of a 10-pence coin. Before you go down the hole, you hang your tag on the board by the cage bank. The underground side. The underground side. When you come back up, you move it to the surface side, and that's how the banksman knows who's still below. The board is older than the electric winder, and it keeps every tag that was ever issued, including the ones from men who died in the workings decades ago. Nobody ever took those down. Nobody ever dared to be the one to start. It's not superstition exactly. It's just that no man wants to be the one who clears a dead man's tag off its hook. That night, there were 18 tags on the underground side. That was all. 18. Then the west tunnel came down. The shock traveled up the shaft like a fist through a chimney, and it rattled the windows of my hoist room. I felt it in my feet through the concrete. Dust poured out of the ventilation ducts, gray and thick, the kind of dust you only get when something big has let go. Then the radio filled with men shouting over each other, and I did what you do. I took the cage down to level 6. They were waiting on the plat when I got there, all 18 of them, which was a relief, because for a minute I'd been counting on my fingers and coming up short. Some of them were bleeding. One had his arm in a bad way. Another couldn't stand straight without 2 men holding him. Their deputy counted them as they climbed in. 16. 17. 18. That's everyone. I closed the gate and brought them up. On the surface, the medics took over, and we went down the list against the board twice, because that's what you do. Every name checked off. Nobody missing. I remember thinking we'd got away with it. About an hour later, Mara from security came and fetched me. Mara Hesketh. She's run the security office since before I started, and she doesn't say much, but when she does, it's worth hearing. She had the elevator recording paused on her screen, and she pointed at it without a word. The footage showed the men packed in the cage shoulder to shoulder, lamps blazing off the mesh, dust hanging in the light. And at the back, against the far wall, there was another man, facing the wall. His lamp was off. His overalls were darker than anything we issue. Black, almost, though that might just be the light. The men around him were pressed right up against each other, but not one of them touched him. He was standing in a pocket of air nobody could feel. Mara counted the figures on the screen twice. She's not a woman who counts twice. 19, she said. I told her the camera dropped frames. It's an old system, it does. Everyone knows it does. It can lose people, she said. It can't add one. We showed the recording to the men who'd ridden up. One by one they watched it, and one by one they shook their heads. Nobody recognized him. Stranger still, nobody remembered anybody standing in that corner. A couple of them got angry about it, the way men do when they're scared and don't want to be. The manager put it down to a fault in the recording. He had us copy the tape for the inspectors, and he told everyone else it was corruption in the files. For a day or two, it nearly worked. It's easier to believe a camera than a ghost, and anyway, we had a tunnel to dig out. The rescue teams were still going down. The next morning, 6 men went down to look at the collapse. I ran the cage, Mara watched her screens. The cage went down smooth as anything. When they reached level 6, Mara rang me on the internal line. We don't ring mid-trip. It's not proper practice, so I knew something was wrong before she said a word. He's there again, she said. On her recording, there were 7 men in the cage. I pulled up the live feed on my own monitor. 6. We ran her tape back and watched it again. 7. Every time, 7. The 6 came back up safe and swore blind. They'd been alone in the cage the whole way. I believed them, too. That was the worst part of it. I believed them. Management swapped the camera that afternoon, fresh unit out of the box. We tested it on the shaft top, and the picture was perfect. Clean. No ghosting. That night, after the last crew went home, Mara and I stayed on. I don't know what I was hoping to prove. The cage had been sitting there since the afternoon, and I couldn't stop looking at it, so I did the only thing I could think of. I ran it empty. I checked it myself first. No tools, no loose clothing, nothing under the floor. Then I closed the gate, lowered it 30 meters, and brought it back. The live monitor showed an empty cage. The recording didn't. The stranger had ridden down alone, and this time he stood in the middle of the floor, still facing away. And the load cell told us something else. While the cage was moving, it was carrying an extra 81 kilos, and the moment it stopped, the weight was gone. I've done the maths 100 times since. The load cell reads the cage at rest and in motion. It's a simple device, and the only way it gives you a number like that is if the weight doesn't exist unless the cage is moving, falling or rising, between one place and the other. 81 kilos. My last medical said I was 83, in my boots. I've thought about those 2 kilos a lot. The manager told us to keep it to ourselves. The rescue team still had to clear that tunnel, and panic would shut the mine faster than any inspector could. He wasn't wrong. So we kept it to ourselves, and the descents went on. Every time the cage went down, he was on the recording. You could chart him, if you were daft enough to keep records. The first time, he was pressed against the back wall. A few trips later, he stood halfway to the gate. On the trip after that, he was standing directly behind a lad called Owen Briggs. Owen went missing 2 hours later. He'd gone into a service passage with another man to look at a damaged water line. 50 meters long, straight as a ruler, no branches. His mate reached the far end, turned around, and was on his own. They found Owen's lamp on the floor. His footprint stopped beside it, in the dust. We measured that passage twice. I helped do it myself. The rock on both sides was solid. There was no door, no crack, no way a man could fit through. He couldn't have gone anywhere. He was gone anyway. That evening we ran the footage again, frame by frame. The stranger's clothes had changed. He was wearing Owen's jacket, the one with the repaired sleeve and the white stripe across the shoulders. I'd have known it anywhere. Owen sewed that sleeve himself after a snag, and he was proud of it. He was still facing the wall, but there was one more detail. Hanging off his belt was a brass tag. Owen's number. We went and looked at the board. Owen's tag was still hanging under his name. I know what that means now, though I didn't then. The mine keeps 2 of everything it takes. 1 to hang on the board. 1 to take down with it. The rescue crews wouldn't go down after that, and I couldn't blame them. The mine closed while the inspectors traveled up from the city, and until they arrived, the manager wanted 1 more test on the hoist. That's the kind of man he was. Even then, the hoist had to be right. Mara and I were the only ones left in the shaft building when we did it. I checked the cage. She checked the cameras. I lowered it. The stranger was on the recording before the cage had moved a meter. He wasn't wearing Owen's jacket anymore. He was wearing a gray hoist operator's coat with an orange stripe around the right sleeve. The same coat I was wearing. On the screen, the figure raised his left hand and put it flat against the cage wall. And without thinking. I swear I didn't think. My own left hand came up and rested against the glass of the hoist room window. I pulled mine away. He didn't pull his. "Stop the cage," Mara said. I let the lever go. I didn't throw it. I let it go, the way you do 100 times a shift. Nothing happened. The cage kept going down. The depth counter ran past level 6. Then it ran past level 7. Calder Vale doesn't have a level 7. It never has. The plans end at 6, and the shaft proper ends at 702 meters. But the counter kept going, down into a part of the shaft that isn't on any plan. Can't be on any plan, because there's nothing down there to dig. The radio crackled. A voice came through it, low, like a man speaking with his mouth an inch from the grill. Not words, exactly. Numbers. Counting. 19. 18. 17. The counter ran down past it. 16. 15. Mara reached over and unplugged the radio. The voice kept going. It came through her monitor speaker. Through the speakers in the office. I could hear it downstairs, faint and patient, still counting. 14. 13. Then the cage stopped. The depth readout said 941 meters. The mine ends at 702. For a long moment, nothing happened. It was quiet enough to hear my own blood. Then the call bell rang 3 times. 1 long, 2 short, the signal for "Bring her up." I'd rung that bell 1,000 times myself. It had never once rung itself. The controls came on by themselves. The cage started to rise. On the monitor, the stranger was still facing the wall, but as the cage climbed, his head began to turn. Not his body. Just his head. Slowly, like he had all the time in the world. By the time the counter reached level 6, he was looking over his shoulder at the camera. The picture was too dark to make out a face. Then his lamp came on. The camera went white. Every light in the building went out. The hoist room, the office, the lamp room, all of it. I've been through power cuts before. This wasn't a power cut. We could hear the cage coming up through the dark, through the floor. Steel rattling. Cable whining. Getting closer. Mara ran for the door. The emergency lock sealed it before she got there. It's fail-safe. It locks when the power drops. That's the design. I tried the manual release. It wouldn't move. That part isn't in the design. The cage reached the top. I felt the gate scrape open before I saw it. The lights came back on. The bank was empty. The cage was empty. Mara stood beside me, breathing like she'd run a mile. Then she went very still, and I followed her eyes to the tag board. Every tag was on the underground side. All 412 of them, the living and the dead, back to the tags from the old workings that should have been cleared decades ago. Every single one had moved. Including mine. I've never gone underground in my life. I run the hoist. I don't ride it. My tag has hung on the surface side of that board for 24 years without ever once being moved. And there it was now, on the underground side. And at the bottom of the board, on the last hook, hung a tag I'd never seen. Polished. Not a mark on it. Brass that had never been handled. Stamped into it, Frank Dawson. The mine keeps 2 of everything it takes. I'd known that since Owen. I just hadn't known it applied to the living. Behind us, the elevator gate closed itself. The descent alarm sounded. The one that warns everyone to stay clear before the cage moves. Mara grabbed my arm. I didn't feel her grab it. I was watching the monitor. The cage was moving down. Empty. On the live feed, The live feed, not the recording. The stranger stood inside it. He was facing the camera now. His face was still lost under the helmet, but he had something in his hand, held up between two fingers like a ticket. A brass tag. One nurse? The fresh one, from the bottom of the board. I'd seen the mine do that once before, with Owen. The tag on the hook, and the same tag at his belt. Then he lifted his other hand and pointed, not at the camera, past it, at the hoist room, at us. Mara turned first. You have to give her that. She turned first. There was a man standing behind us, between the tagboard and the door, facing the wall. His lamp was off. He was wearing my coat. I checked my own sleeves without meaning to. I was still wearing it. I don't know why that made it worse. It made it much worse. And from the shaft below, from the shaft that ends at 702 meters, from the part that doesn't exist, came the sound of another cage rising. There's only ever been one cage at Calder Vale. I know. I ran it for 24 years.